Welcome back, everyone, to the Seed Butter channel. Today, I'm honored to bring you the James Bond series Iceberg, created by deleted? Yeah, I'm not sure who created this iceberg, but I can say I believe it to be the best James Bond iceberg out there, so whoever you are, thanks for making this. I want to keep this intro short and sweet, so make sure to like and subscribe if you like the video. Seriously, it really helps me out, and I couldn't be more grateful for the amount of growth I've seen this year. It's really just been incredible. Now let's go ahead and kick off this video with the first tier of this iceberg. Also, before I get started, I need to make it clear that there will be spoilers for the Bond books, games, and movies, new and old, so if that worries you in any means, you have been warned. The Broccoli family. The story of the Broccoli family begins with Albert R. Broccoli, a man who, in the 1950s, decided that he wanted to turn Ian Fleming's James Bond book series into film. He unfortunately learned that the rights to the films belonged to a man named Harry Saltzman, but when the two were introduced by a mutual friend, they decided to go in together and create James Bond movies. They created their own production company, and in 1962, the first James Bond movie, Dr. No, was released. He would continue to make early Bond movies, and in 1995 handed the reins of his production company over to his daughter Barbara and stepson Michael G. Wilson, who still run the company to this day. So basically, the rights to the James Bond movies have been controlled by one family since the very beginning, which is quite interesting. Michael G. Wilson cameos. Michael G. Wilson, stepson of Albert Broccoli, has made cameo appearances in every James Bond film since 1977 and also the 1964 movie Goldfinger. He usually had non-speaking roles and he was often uncredited. The Wine Man. The Wine Man is another man with multiple cameos in the series. He does this bit where he sees James Bond do something crazy and then he stares at his wine in disbelief. He did this in The Spy Who Loved Me, Moonraker, and For Your Eyes Only. His name is Viktor Trojansky, and at the time he lived in Italy, which is why he appears in Mediterranean scenes. 1967 Casino Royale. So, if you're a Bond fan, you've heard of this Casino Royale, but back in 1967, another Casino Royale was made, this time a spy parody, loosely based off the Casino Royale book. David Niven played Bond, and the movie was, well, really bad. The rights have since been sold to the distributors of Broccoli's production company. James Bond Jr. James Bond Jr. is an American cartoon that ran from 1991 to 92 with 65 episodes. To date, it's the only ever James Bond TV show. James Bond Jr. was James Bond's nephew, and Q's grandson was also in the show. It featured appearances from real Bond villains, and 2 video games were made based on the show. Roald Dahl, You Only Live Twice. The screenplay for You Only Live Twice was actually written by children's author Roald Dahl. Interestingly, this wouldn't be the only Ian Fleming book that Roald Dahl would write a screenplay for. He did the same thing for Chitty Chitty Bang Bang a little while later. David Bowie as Max Zorin. David Bowie almost played Max Zorin in A View to a Kill, a role that would eventually go to Christopher Walken. Though Bowie backed out at the last minute, it's speculated that Zorin's look was partially inspired by Bowie's iconic hair. Geoffrey Boothroyd. Boothroyd was a British firearms expert who provided advice to both Ian Fleming and the filmmakers of Bond movies whenever firearms were written about or used. It began when Boothroyd wrote a letter to Fleming in 1956 saying that he loved the story, but thought that James Bond wasn't using good enough guns, saying that the .25 caliber Beretta is, quote, really a lady's gun. They then wrote many letters back and forth to one another, and Fleming took lots of his suggestions to heart. There's a documentary about his role in the series called The Guns of James Bond, and from this it's clear that he had a huge impact on the franchise. Sean Connery's toupee. Sean Connery is often accepted as the greatest James Bond, but did you know that he was bald?
Bald people are a joke! I'm bald, sir. Exactly!
Yeah, you might not have known this, but he's wearing a toupee in all the movies he was in. That's crazy, right? Never Say Never Again. Never Say Never Again is a Bond film where Sean Connery starred as Bond 12 years after his last appearance. The title is somewhat of a call-out to Connery saying that he would never play Bond again, and yet, he did. James Bond is a codename theory. So, how would James Bond exist in so many different times looking so differently? Well, what if the name James Bond itself was just a code name and it was passed from agent to agent like the 007 mantle? Well, unfortunately, this is kind of considered a theory for newbies because it can be disproven so many times over. There's lots of reasons this wouldn't work, like the fact that we learned that Daniel Craig's Bond is really named Bond. And there's even some continuity between characters when Bond actors were swapped in older movies. Unfortunately, there really isn't a perfect theory explaining a connection between the Bond movies. You could hypothetically use the codename with certain theories, but not all of them as a whole, and certainly not the Daniel Craig movies. Spectre was originally SMERSH. Spectre is a recurring villainous organization in the James Bond movies. However, it's based off the real-life organization SMERSH, a Russian counterintelligence agency. In the movies, however, SMERSH was swapped out for Spectre, probably to be a little bit more politically neutral, and maybe also because SMERSH sounds funny. License Revoked. License Revoked was the original title for License to Kill, though it was swapped because producers thought it would sound like Bond's driver's license and not his license to kill. There do exist some promotional materials which use this original name, though. Skin suffocation. In Goldfinger, Jill Masterson is killed by skin suffocation when she is painted completely gold. 007 has this to say about it. She died of skin suffocation. It's been known to happen to cabaret dancers. It's alright so long as you leave a small bare patch at the base of the spine to allow the skin to breathe. This is quite literally the dumbest medical explanation I have ever heard. You might not know this, but your skin doesn't actually breathe, your mouth and nose do. You could paint yourself gold all you want because it literally will not kill you. That's like the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Inception was created by OHMSS. According to Christopher Nolan, the legendary movie Inception was inspired by the James Bond movie On Her Majesty's Secret Service. One clear similarity between the two films is an alpine action sequence, and according to Nolan, that is his favorite Bond film. What makes you think this is my first time? In Skyfall, there's a scene when Sylvia, the villain of the film, is sort of flirting with James Bond, asking him what his training says about it, and saying that there's a first time for everything, to which Bond replies,
"What makes you think this is my first time?"
As you can probably imagine, this line created a lot of division within the studio, and Barbara Broccoli explained that she had to fight to keep it in the film. Since she and her stepbrother have the final say on what stays in the film, what she says goes, and the line was kept. Dave Bautista injured Daniel Craig. During the filming of Spectre, specifically this train fight scene, when the man playing a henchman was going a bit gentle with Craig, who told him to be a little bit rougher, at which point he threw Craig pretty hard into a wall. Craig landed poorly and hurt his knee. And don't worry though, because later on, Daniel Craig accidentally broke this guy's nose. Eurospy movies. Eurospy movies are a genre of movies that try to imitate James Bond, usually filmed in France, Italy, Spain, or something of that like. They include traits of an anonymous, independent protagonist, crazy gadgets, and money-hungry villains. While there isn't a hard rule for what constitutes a Eurospy movie, it's sort of accepted that there are around 50 of these, and they try to imitate Bond at all stages of production, even in the film posters. Boris Grishenko is autistic. There's a relatively small theory suggesting that Boris Grishenko from GoldenEye, a computer programmer, has autism. Proponents of this theory suggest that it has to do with the fact that he clicks a pen repeatedly, which could be seen as sort of a tic, I guess, and the fact that oftentimes intelligent computer programmers are typecasted as people with autism. In my opinion, this isn't good enough evidence, and it really doesn't mean anything to the story anyway. Anthony Hopkins is Trevelyan or Carver. Anthony Hopkins was thought of when Trevelyan from GoldenEye was originally going to be an old mentor, and not a peer of James Bond, so he ended up not fitting into the role. Later on though, he would be offered the role of Carver, but turned it down when he learned that the script was being rewritten late in the game. M and Q's real names. The letter Q stands for quartermaster, which makes a whole lot of sense. However, the meaning of M is a bit trickier to pin down. There's a couple different ideas about what it means. One idea is that the name M comes from William Melville, the head of the Secret Service Bureau, the predecessor to MI5 and MI6, who was referred to in government circles as M. In Moonraker, M is a man with a first and last name starting with the letter M, which could also be what it's from. So, yeah, at one point it was probably just the initials for Miles M, the head of MI6 and Moonraker, and now it's just used as a code name, but really it doesn't stand for anything like Quartermaster does. It's just stuck for a while because it sounds good. Tomorrow Never Lies. So, the movie Tomorrow Never Dies was originally pitched as Tomorrow Never Lies. Screenwriter Bruce Fierstein was thinking of a name when he was listening to the Beatles' Revolver album, which has a song on it called Tomorrow Never Knows. He then came up with the title Tomorrow Never Lies because it was a common enough catchphrase and sounded like a good title. There then became a lot of debate in the studio about whether it should be Tomorrow Never Lies or Dies, because Dies is much more dramatic and Bond-like, but the group decided they should stick with Lies because it was a common catchphrase and people would know it. MGM was faxed the new title, but an assistant accidentally typed Dies and not Lies, even though Lies was what everyone agreed on. But MGM approved the title anyway, and the rest is history. (1954's Casino Royale TV special. In 1954, a TV adaptation of Casino Royale came out based on the book. This is actually the first on-screen appearance of James Bond, though his details are a little changed around. First off, he's American, and he works for the Combined Intelligence Agency. It's actually an episode on a different TV show called Climax. It was considered lost media until 1981 when film historian Joe Schoenberger uncovered it. The credits wouldn't be found till later on. And also, the original broadcast was in color, but all we have today is a black and white version. MGM bought out the rights to this episode, which is how the 2006 Casino Royale movie was able to be created. It's a pretty interesting story, though. Maybe one day we'll be able to find the color version. Austin Powers predicted Blofeld. In Austin Powers, a hilarious spoof movie making fun of the Bond series, Dr. Evil, a character resembling Ernst Blofeld, was revealed to be Austin Powers' secret twin brother. Interestingly, James Bond would actually learn that Blofeld is his own brother later on in Spectre. It's pretty funny how a movie with such an intentionally dumb plot was able to predict what the real James Bond films would do, and also, Blofeld is just a term for Blofeld being James Bond's, well, bro. James Bond Tabletop RPG. James Bond 007 Role-Playing in Her Majesty's Secret Service is a tabletop RPG published by Victory Games made from 1983 to 87. It was the most popular spy RPG at the time and actually looks pretty fun. As you can see, the materials are pretty cool. Peter Scaramanga and John Blofeld. Here's an interesting story. So Scaramanga and Blofeld are both Bond villains, as you probably know, but they're based off real people. Peter Scaramanga and John Blofeld were two kids who went to school with Ian Fleming's nephew, and they were bullies. When Ian Fleming heard stories about them, he decided to name two supervillains after the kids, who you can see in this picture here. So everyone in my audience, remember not to be a bully, not just because it's wrong, but because you may go on to name a supervillain for years to come. Erno Goldfinger. This is another interesting story about how a Bond character's name came to be. So Erno Goldfinger was a Hungarian-born architect and furniture designer. Here are some of his buildings which, I gotta say, I am not a fan of in any capacity. He was also a pretty big jerk and was known to fire assistants for having fun and things like that. One day, Ian Fleming was golfing with Goldfinger's cousin, and he got the bright idea to name the Bond villain after him. Why? Well, when Goldfinger made his house in Hampstead, he demolished some nice old cottages, which Fleming objected to. After the book was published, Goldfinger sued Fleming, which made Fleming threaten to rename the character Goldprick to further make fun of Goldfinger, which pressured Goldfinger to drop the suit. After this lovely exchange, Fleming's publishers made it up to Goldfinger by paying his legal fees and sending him 6 free copies of the book, which I'm sure was exactly what he wanted to arrive in his mail after making an entire lawsuit over this. Birds of the West Indies. So, we've talked about how Goldfinger, Blofeld, and Scaramanga got their names, but what about James Bond himself? Well, it actually comes from James Bond, the author of the book Birds of the West Indies, which Ian Fleming had on his bookshelf. Why was he drawn to the name James Bond specifically? Fleming himself explains this here, saying he was looking for a very flat name.
Mr. Fleming, how does an author tackle the problem of selecting a name for the hero of his stories?
Well, it isn't only the hero. I mean, I generally pick up names just driving through the countryside.
Village is a song, it's an interesting name.
But when I started to write these books in 1952, I wanted to find a name which wouldn't have any of this romantic overtones like Peregrine Carruthers or whatever it might be. I wanted a really flat, quiet name. And one of my Bibles out
Interestingly,
here,
the two men would actually get to meet each other. While James Bond and his wife Mary were on vacation in Jamaica, they showed up unannounced to Fleming's estate named Goldeneye and knocked on the door. To their surprise, Fleming was in the middle of a CBC interview and happily explained what was going on to the film crew. Then he turned to Bond and said, "This will sell more of your books and mine." Unfortunately, this would be the only time these two men met because Fleming died of a heart attack 6 months later. They're all the same Bond. So there really isn't a good answer to explain the continuity of Bond films, and the actors are certainly not all the same Bond. However, some tend to think that before the Craig movies, all these actors were playing one version of Bond. The last part is up for debate, but it's certain that all the movies from Casino Royale up until this point are one Bond character, that of course being played by Daniel Craig. Since the pre-Craig movies did have some cross-actor connections, it's possible that they're all in the same universe and the change of actor is just supposed to be ignored, but that's sort of unlikely. How do you guys interpret the continuity issues? I'm curious. Saab 900 Turbo Bond Car. The Saab 900 Turbo was Bond's car of choice in the Bond novels written by John Gardner. Interestingly, in these books, it's Bond's personal car, outfitted with technology paid for by himself, not by Q. It's certainly not as cool as the typical Aston Martin driven by Bond, but it's still pretty sweet. The Rock is a James Bond movie. So there is an incredibly detailed fan theory that the 1996 film The Rock, starring Sean Connery, is secretly a James Bond film. I won't even try to explain the theory because there's a fantastic video about it and a long essay on Reddit explaining it, which both do a far greater job than I ever could. Seriously, the theory is insane. One fun piece of trivia I'll cover though is that during a 1996 interview with Michael Bay, the director of the movie, he had this to say about the movie. "The picture shows that James Bond can age and he can still be mean. One day when we were filming, Sean came up to me and whispered, 'You know what I'm doing. I'm getting to be James Bond without being called James Bond.'" So, even if this theory isn't technically confirmed by the people behind the movie, it was at least thought about by them. Roger Moore as Bond in 1964. Roger Moore was a British actor who played Bond in a few films starting in the 70s, but he actually had the chance to play James Bond in 1964, around 10 years before his official Bond debut. It was during a BBC comedy sketch called Mainly Millicent, which you could actually see online today. GoldenEye Long Mouth. In the iconic GoldenEye 007 game, James Bond is on the cover holding his gun, with his hand of course. Or is he? Let me present to you James Bond with a long mouth. Look at that thing, man. I'll literally never unsee that now, jeez. Why Lin and Jinx spin-offs. So while many people thought this was the first female 007, Michael Wilson and Barbara Broccoli have actually been pursuing a female Bond since 1997, and they've tried for characters Y Lin and Jinx both to get their own movies, but MGM never actually let the project get up and running. These movies definitely could have been cool, but it's interesting that this was planned all the way back in 1997. Alleged Ian Fleming from Russia with Love cameo. It's suggested that this man right here in From Russia with Love is Ian Fleming, though it's never been confirmed. Analysis of the shot suggests that it could be him, given that Fleming would visit the site often and dressed in similar clothing and had the same cane. The men seem close enough looking, and why else would somebody else just be standing there? It's a weird shot, but stranger still that the producers would never confirm this. Operation Kid Brother / OK Connery. Operation Kid Brother, released in the US as OK Connery, is an Italian Eurospy movie where James Bond is played by Sean Connery's brother, Neil Connery. It's known as being laughably bad. Dalton's third film scripts. Timothy Dalton played Bond in 2 movies, but he could have played him for a third movie that never came to be. Allegedly, this movie might have been called Property of a Lady, and though nothing is concrete, rumors explaining bits and pieces of the storyline have drifted out every few years. It could have been shot in Vancouver and Hong Kong, having a plot loosely based on advanced robots going haywire, but again, we'll really never know what this movie was about. For Your Eyes Only Canadian remake. Due to some loophole in copyright law, the rights to For Your Eyes Only expired in Canada around 2015, leading some filmmakers to announce a project to remake the film. And who would have played Bond? Ryan Reynolds, of course. This project has been quote-unquote in the works since 2015, and in all likelihood, this will never go anywhere whatsoever. It's kind of just a joke at this point, but it is kind of funny that two filmmakers think that they could get Ryan Reynolds to do this. Mysteriously cancelled Octopussy game. In 1982, Parker Bros. Announced that they were designing a James Bond game to be released the following year. It was supposed to be a tie-in for the Octopussy movie, and it would have been the first of its kind. It would have been based on the train scene in the movie. A ton of money was spent advertising the game, and there was even a prototype shown off at CES in 1983. However, without explanation, Parker Bros. Scrapped the game and instead released a completely different one called James Bond 007, which has been described as a Moon Patrol ripoff with loose references to Bond material. So what the heck happened to the original game? Well, it's lost media, and no cartridge or build of the game has ever been found, though some people did see it at CES with their own eyes. It's speculated that the game wasn't completed, or maybe they made both games at the same time and just decided to only release that one. Well, hopefully we can discover a build of this game sometime soon, but the chances of that grow slimmer and slimmer every day. Q Branch is real. If the Q Branch, in the same capacity that it exists in the movies, is real, I certainly don't know about it. But there probably is a similar enough counterpart in the real MI6 or in Her Majesty's Government Communications Center, maybe? I don't really know. Jaws died and deleted The Spy Who Loved Me scene. So, I guess there's a deleted scene from The Spy Who Loved Me where Jaws dies, but I can't actually find it, so if you guys know what it is or what I'm supposed to be looking for, please let me know in the comments. Grace Jones? Prank. So, on the set of A View to a Kill, Roger Moore was known for playing pranks on everybody, and one day Grace Jones decided to play one too. When they were filming a love scene between the two of them, she surprised Moore by wearing a giant, thing, which you can look into further if you want. 007 in New York. 007 in New York is a short story written by Ian Fleming that wasn't ever published until 2002. It's a bit goofy, and it follows James Bond looking for a woman, but having a free day to spend in New York, so he plans out the day, and eventually though he realizes that he planned to meet the girl in the reptile house at the Central Park Zoo, but the Central Park Zoo doesn't actually have a reptile house, so he has a last-minute panic and reschedules the meeting. That's literally the plot of the story. I'm not surprised this didn't go released for a while. Maud Adams in A View to a Kill. Maud Adams was a Bond girl in 2 films, but she actually shows up for a cameo in A View to a Kill. You could see her alongside her boyfriend at this fisherman's wharf right here. Safin's true motivations. The creator of the Iceberg explained in a comment that this was more of a personal entry theory, suggesting that Safin only wanted to kill criminals, which is why he wanted to make the world a better place. That's all for this one. Danny Boyle's No Time to Die script. Danny Boyle wrote a script for No Time to Die, which he ended up never making. Supposedly, this had to do with creative differences between him and MGM, and we don't really know much about what this movie entailed besides a few details, like Tamaz Cod potentially being cast as the main villain. Dr. No was originally a monkey. I can't believe I'm going to say what I'm about to say. In the original draft for Dr. No, the first James Bond movie, Bond's ultimate nemesis in his first ever motion picture debut was written to be a monkey. Yeah, you heard that right. A freaking monkey. Albert Broccoli took one look at the script and was horrified, sending it back immediately and advising that the next script needed to be closer to the source material. Imagine this entire series never existing because somebody decided to make the main antagonist a monkey. I should clarify, this monkey was no ordinary monkey, but it was written to be a simian deity idol that could be worshipped by island natives, and he did have a human avatar, but that somehow makes it even dumber. The GoldenEye sound. This right here is the GoldenEye sound. is that? Well, it's actually a tambourine note slowed down about 17 times. Obviously, this is a teeny detail, but it sparked a huge debate over the years, which is why it's so interesting that we figured it out. Side note, this game has such an incredible soundtrack, it's insane. The codename theory was almost canon. In Die Another Day, there was originally supposed to be an appearance from Sean Connery, not just as a small cameo, but as him temporarily reprising his 007 role, which would confirm the codename theory to be canon. Many agree that while this would have been interesting, Die Another Day was not the movie for this to occur in, because that plot was kind of all over the place and it would have just made that more confusing. Bond turned Pussy Galore straight. In an extremely disrespectful and outright weird letter written by Fleming, he writes a scene where Pussy Galore, who is a lesbian, magically turns straight after Bond kisses her. He goes so far as to say that she, quote, only needed the right man to come along and perform the laying on of hands in order to cure her psychopathological malady. Wow. Bond has Witzelschut. Witzelschut is a set of symptoms where a person makes jokes or puns in inappropriate situations without control over themselves, and they can't really understand sarcasm. This would explain Bond's courageous ability to constantly laugh in the face of deadly situations, but I'd say it's more of a confidence thing than an actual disorder. This is an interesting thought, though. Gert Frobe Nazi affiliation. Gert Frobe, the man who played Goldfinger, was an actual Nazi, like a literal member of the Nazi Party from 1929 until 1937. He was drafted into the German army in 1944, but Holocaust survivor Mario Blumenau claimed that Frobe saved him and his mother from being caught by the Nazis, which actually led to his films being unbanned in Israel. Zbigniew Krzyzewski. In Christopher Wood's novelization of The Spy Who Loved Me, Jaw's real name is revealed to be Zbigniew Krzyzewski. I have no idea if I got that remotely correct, but yeah, that's his real name. For Your Eyes Only, Stuntman Death. During the filming of the bobsled scene in For Your Eyes Only, 23-year-old stuntman Pablo Rigoni tragically died after getting trapped under the bobsled. This happened just a week after USA dogsled driver James Morgan was killed at the same turn on the same course, which had to be modified to be less tight to make it safer. It was just a poorly designed track. 2 people losing their lives in just 1 week is crazy. Kim Jong-il saw Die Another Day. Kim Jong-il was apparently a movie fanatic, boasting that he had seen at least 30,000. Reportedly, he watched Die Another Day and was saddened that the villain was a North Korean leader. Interesting that he was sad and surprised by that, as if he didn't completely put himself in that situation. Cinesound Gunshot 01. Cinesound Gunshot 01 is a sound effect in the Cinesound library that was notably used for this famous Bond intro. But it's also appeared in dozens of other films. Timothy Dalton GoldenEye Deepfake. This entry refers to a YouTube video by 10 Deepfake, which deepfaked Timothy Dalton over the face of Pierce Bronson, doing so incredibly well. Just look at this, that's insane. GoldenEye 64 Citadel. In GoldenEye 64, the Citadel is speculated to be an unused, incomplete level, originating from this image in the game's files referencing the level. Now, Rare responded to inquiring gamers, saying that Citadel did not exist on the cartridge in any capacity, and it was just a rough multiplayer test map. However, it gets a bit more complicated than that. There's text in the game referencing an unused level called Cat, which some speculated to be short for Cathedral, and Citadel and Cathedral were roughly considered the same map for a while. This assumption would end up being correct, and one day the rumored level would actually be discovered. It could only be loaded in the PAL version of the game, not the North American or Japanese one, but you would spawn at coordinates far from the actual map, so it was even longer before we could actually explore the map, but now we can, and this is what it looks like. While it's a rough and nearly unplayable map, this is where multiplayer for such an incredible and influential game was born. You could check out a fun video here talking about the map's history. Tomorrow Never Dies tried to warn us. While I'm not 100% sure what this is referring to, I believe it's talking about how Elliot Carver could represent many figures in today's world. A man who controls enough media to influence narratives and provoke a war between two countries simply to get more power from himself, that kinda hits close to home. As opposed to other Bond villains, he wasn't going for gold or some goofy world domination goal, but he just wanted to control the flow of information, which hits closely to some situations going on in today's world. Die Another Day takes place in the afterlife. There's a theory that Die Another Day takes place in the afterlife, which is explained in a bit more detail here, and there's lots of little things that point to it, such as the fact that the movie begins with Bond being captured and tortured for 14 months, which could have been too much for him to handle. When he eventually leaves, he crosses the Bridge of No Return, a place between North and South Korea, in a prisoner exchange. So you can already see some themes of crossing from one place to another never to return. And the Ice Palace may also be representative of a cold, dead state that Bond is in. The Iceberg creator also suggests that this theory sort of exists to justify how outlandish the plot of Die Another Day is. Like, it definitely goes overboard with the race-changing surgery and invisible cars and stuff, so keep that in mind too. Dolly Brace's Mandela Effect. Hey, who doesn't love a good Mandela Effect story? In Moonraker, did Dolly have braces? Did she look like this? I mean, it looks like it, this looks real enough, but actually, she never did. People are certain that it happened in the theaters at least, but it literally never did. There were even jokes about how Jaws was in a relationship with a girl who had braces, which was, funny, but she never ever had them. It's speculated that because of her nerdy look, people just assumed she had braces, but again, she never did. This image is totally fake. Dolly never had braces. The Man with the Golden Gun bodies in the river. This story is actually quite creepy. While filming a scene for The Man with the Golden Gun in Thailand, Roger Moore was told not to fall in the water. Now, he did so twice, the first time to be funny since the producers told him not to, but the second time was a total accident. On this second accidental fall, he opened his eyes, seeing that there were dead bodies in the river. The bodies of less fortunate people at the time would literally be dumped in these rivers, which Roger Moore had to see face to face. Yikes. License to Kill Haunted Road. When filming License to Kill, cast members reported strange occurrences happening on this one road where just a few years ago, 5 nuns were killed in a car crash. People reported seeing trucks at night that weren't really there, or trucks in the distance catching on fire. The most notable thing about this, however, was this picture, taken on set when a tanker was blown up. Doesn't this resemble a hand? You can't see this picture anywhere in the movie. It's a shot taken from another camera, but could this be a ghastly figure reaching out into the living world? Probably not, but there certainly were a lot of weird coincidences happening here. Knick-Knack's Prostitutes. This entry is about an account from Roger Moore saying that Knick-Knack hung out with upwards of 35 women during the filming of The Man with the Golden Gun. It's a really strange read. Moore also accounts that Knick-Knack once told him, quote, "Don't touch me, you are disease." This is a really strange entry for sure. I'm not really sure what to make of it, but read the article yourself if you're in for a laugh. The Craig villains represent the 7 deadly sins. This is a theory detailed in the comments of the original post, but here's how it goes. Medrano represents lust, Green represents gluttony, Le Chiffre represents greed, Mr. White represents sloth since he's always sneaking in the shadows and he only shows up when the job's already done, Sylvia represents wrath, Safin represents envy, and Blofeld represents pride. These don't fit perfectly, and honestly, I feel like people always try to apply the 7 deadly sins trope to whatever they possibly can whenever they see 7 things because of its literary significance. I personally think it's a bit of a stretch, but what do you guys think? How would you amend the theory? James Bond is a Time Lord. Now, this is a theory I can get behind. Want to explain how James Bond can look differently and appear in different times and places on top of just being an overpowered and awesome dude in general? Maybe he's a Time Lord. Want more evidence? He's British. Yeah, that's about all I've got for this theory. Le Chiffre de 9/11. There's a scene in the movie where M mentions Le Chiffre shorting airline stocks, which had to do with him planning a sort of attack involving an airplane, and perhaps he did the same thing during 9/11. Personally, it would make more sense that he was inspired by what happened and didn't actually have anything to do with 9/11, but since he shorted airline stocks here, it's possible he did the same thing back in 2001. I honestly doubt this one, though. A delicacy in stainless steel meaning. This is a phrase used in For Your Eyes Only that doesn't really make much sense. What is a delicacy in stainless steel? What does that mean? Well, the phrase was personally made by Albert Broccoli, who was referencing Italian mobs that he knew when he grew up in Queens. Delicatessens are small cheeses or meats, and I guess the Italian mob would bribe people with them. So Broccoli was sort of using this to illustrate Blofeld trying to make a bribe for his life at the end of the movie, which in turn reveals that he's nothing more than a glorified mob boss. But yeah, this strange phrase originates from small meats and cheeses. It's not really surprising why no one understood it. Blofeld's cat is the true head of Spectre. Yeah, I wish. But, given that Dr. No was supposed to be a monkey, I wouldn't put it past the producers to make this cat a supervillain. In reality, this cat was just used as a prop, and the idea of a supervillain holding a cat has become a trope because of James Bond, but it doesn't serve to show that the cat is the villain. It's sort of done to make the villain seem strange, I guess. I don't really know. OOQ, do not research. So I thought this was completely made up, as many do not research topics are on Iceberg charts, but it actually has to do with fan fictions shipping Q and Bond, which I personally will not be looking into, but have fun if you decide to. I could help you immensely if you could only find me a small red fish. This is a line spoken by an NPC in the James Bond 007 Game Boy Advance game, where he asks for your help in finding a red fish. The red fish shows up nowhere else in the game, and in reality is a red herring, a stand-in for a clue or piece of evidence that doesn't really exist. Okay guys, I really hope you enjoyed this video. This was a little different from my usual work, but I thought it was a great Iceberg, and I just had an incredible time making this. I have one more upcoming movie Iceberg that I think is really good, so I hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, stick around for more Icebergs and the occasional random video I make, and please be sure to comment what else you want to see below. I really appreciate when you guys like and comment. It helps my videos, and I love interacting with you guys. It's just great to hear from y'all. So, have a great one. See you all soon. Seed Butter out.